Welcome to MBA PodTV. I'm your host, Dylan Fernando. The Stanford Graduate School of Business is one of the country's premier business schools. With its Silicon Valley location, it also offers a very unique MBA experience. Now, helping increase your chances of getting into Stanford is going to require writing solid essays and getting exceptional recommendations. Today we'll be joined by Linda Abraham, founder and president of Accepted.com, an MBA admissions and essay editing service. She's going to break down each of Stanford's essay questions and give you tips on getting great recommendations. I remember before writing those B-School essays, I would sit down, write an outline, and think about all the things I wanted to convey. Now, while it might be tempting to cut and paste, remember each application and each school is very different. So go ahead and take the time to write an outline for each. Stanford's essay number 1 asks, what matters most to you and why? Let's get tips on answering essay number 1 from Linda Abraham.
This question asks about really the past and the present, what do you value today, but it also wants to know the why, and that usually has to do with the past. Because it asks about the past, there's a little bit of a trap here, and the trap is that the applicant will end up just reiterating their resume, writing a resume in prose, and that would be a big, big, big mistake. That's not what the question's asking for. It's really asking to see what you value. If you value something, presumably you have invested time in it. The applicant, I'll never forget the applicant who years ago told me that he gets really upset when he hears about child abuse. And it just makes his blood boil. And I said, well, that's quite interesting. There happened to have been some horrendous scandal at the time. And I said, that's okay. I said, have you contributed to, have you worked with abused children? Have you contributed to causes, or led causes in some ways that fought child abuse or dealt with the issue? No, it just makes my blood boil. And he just looked terribly shallow. So make sure when you say something is important to you that you can also point to times when you acted on that value and you reflected that value in terms of your commitments and your contributions. Every so often I see rumors that Stanford is looking for obstacles overcome in this essay, and if you don't have an obstacle overcome or you can't write a pity essay, then you're going to be disadvantaged in responding to this question. In other words, those people who are disadvantaged in life are advantaged in responding to the question, and those people who are advantaged in life, they're up the creek, okay, in terms of answering this question. I don't agree with that at all. You can have values, even if you've been advantaged in life. You can have faced obstacles. You can show what's important to you, even if you haven't overcome terrible social ills. And that's the challenge of this question.
Stanford's essay number 2 asks, what do you want to do, really, and why Stanford? Now, this is one of the more familiar business school essays because it asks about your career goals. When I was thinking about this essay, I thought, where do I want to be in 5 years, in 10 years, and what's going to help me get there? Let's hear more about answering Stanford's essay number 2 from Linda Abraham.
This is a question where you have to connect the dots. It's a forward-looking question, where the previous one was about past and present. This one is almost entirely about the future. And you need to connect the dots between what you intend to do at Stanford and what you tend to do beyond Stanford. In terms of your career aspirations and what do you really want to do, first of all, it's what do you want to do, not study. We're talking what function do you want to perform after you leave Stanford, and probably what industry do you want to do it in. Geography may play a role in your dreams and goals. If it does, include it. If it doesn't, if the world is your oyster, there's no real reason to mention it. Then you're going to want to connect your short-term and long-term goals to, or the achievement of those goals, to Stanford. Now, Stanford knows it's outstanding. It doesn't need you to tell it that, but it does need to know what specific elements of the program attract you to it and will help you achieve those dreams and goals. So you're going to want to refer to the customizable elements of the program, perhaps the global study requirement, maybe the first quarter general management, to specific elements of the program, the extracurricular life, that are going to help you achieve your dreams. that makes a really good answer to Essay 2.
Stanford's essay number 3 says, answer one of the 3 questions below. Tell us not only what you did, but also how you did it. What was the outcome? How did people respond? Only describe experiences that have occurred during the last 3 years.
So the first issue you're going to have to deal with is, which question do you respond to? And the answer is deceptively simple. It's the one that's going to add the most value to your application. You want this essay to complement the previous 2, to show another case demonstrated leadership, to show how you've contributed, personal contributions and characteristics. You could use an example from sports. You could obviously use an example from teamwork on the job. You could use an example from a band, or perhaps when you participated in a play. There are tons of things where you can show yourself contributing, having impact, and also leading. And when you're writing about leadership, don't write about leadership. Write about a specific aspect of leadership that you demonstrated in this particular instance. There's so many different subsets of leadership. There's listening, there's motivating, there's persuading, there's understanding human beings. There's so many elements to it that when you only talk in terms of leadership, you kind of blur what you actually did. And that leads to my last point. Don't forget to include results in these essays. It's very important that you are able to show impact, and impact usually is results. Now, there's a great structure for this kind of a experiential question, and that is start with the challenge you faced, discuss the actions you took, and the results you created. And the easiest way to remember this is CAR, the thing we drive all the time. CAR, challenge, action, response.
Having supportive letters of recommendation are critical when applying to a top business school. I remember sitting down with my own recommenders and really articulating what it was that I wanted to get out of my MBA experience. Stanford asks for 3 letters of recommendation, and here's what you should keep in mind.
The recommenders should know you well. Stanford asks for your current direct supervisor, another supervisor who can comment, superior who can comment on your work and evaluate it, and a peer who has been on a team. They're very specific. They don't want a boss. They don't want a subordinate. They want a peer. That one does not have to be professional, but it can be. So if you as the applicant can say, these are Stanford's criteria, if you can highlight them in discussing my achievements, my qualifications for Stanford, I think it'll help me. And so to the extent that Stanford has different values from MIT or Harvard, the recommender should emphasize those qualities in the applicant. But then he should make the same adjustment for MIT and the same adjustment for Harvard. Much like the applicant in writing the essays should not say the same thing for Harvard and the same thing for MIT and the same thing for Stanford, even though they're all top-ranked programs. The applicant has to understand the differences, and I think has to educate very succinctly, without putting an undue burden on the recommender, about what Stanford's looking for. One thing that's really important for all letters of recommendation, and you should encourage your recommenders to do this, is to substantiate any claims they make with an example. That's the difference between a mediocre recommendation that says you're a wonderful person and a great recommendation that says you're a wonderful person who did X, Y, and Z while you worked for me. You achieved, you contributed, if they can, to reveal how you exceeded expectations, took initiative, that kind of thing. The specifics always are going to trump generalities and make for a meaty, powerful letter of recommendation that can really show you meet Stanford's criteria. The tagline on their website, on every page of their website, is change lives, change organizations, change the world. So I think they're serious about it. It's reflective of Stanford's values. Now they're asking to learn about your values as an applicant. You should make sure you know Stanford's values and realize that if you change a life or you change an organization, you are changing the world. Maybe not on a macro level, but that is change. And indeed, when you write your essays, particularly the third question or the 2 options in the third question, you're going to want to reflect that ability to change. And the questions are directed at change and initiative. So I think if you can demonstrate through your application that you have in the past had that kind of impact, and maybe on a mini level change the world, they're going to see that you have the ability to change the world on a greater level, a greater scale going forward.
I hope you picked up a few tips on how to tackle those Stanford essays and recommendations. That's it for this episode of MBA PodTV. I'm your host, Delaney Fernando. Visit us at mbapodcaster.com to register for weekly video and audio shows. Join us on Facebook and Twitter to keep up with the latest news and insights about your MBA application process.